And oh, the camera sagged again.
Oh,
this is going to be a problem. I don't have a good mount. It's cable on it down. Get it to.
At the table now.
So welcome, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, is it?
No.
Welcome to RPG Research. We're in our new studio. What once was old is new again, but it's better than before. New and improved, quite literally. We were in my garage, and it worked okay, but the temperature, the homeostasis was problematic. You know, during the spring and fall, it was fine.
Everything else was fine about it.
Yeah, but
yeah.
In the winter and summer...
I brought a heating pack a couple of times.
Oh yeah, well not only that, my utility bills went over $1,000 a month sometimes, but it doubled, tripled, quadrupled each month because of trying to keep that studio warm. And that was only turning on and off for each session, right? I wasn't running all the time.
Yeah.
And so all the air conditioners I had to get up and running, we kept blowing all the breakers and trying to make it comfortable enough for everybody to enjoy. And
I'm surprised you didn't black out the neighborhood.
With all the stuff I'm running, yeah. That's why there are circuit breakers and such in stages. So now that summer is coming, it's getting hot. We, thanks to wonderful volunteers like John, Danielle, Shane, Trevor, his son Trevor, David, Dan, Ivy. We have a lot of Dans, so I'll specify Dan Ivy. Nicholas, our newest volunteer to help as a sysadmin and stuff. Thanks to all their hard work, we get all these books and oh my goodness, there's a ton of stuff here. In fact, let me tilt the camera around a little bit for you. Got all this stuff moved.
You can see our not quite finished.
Yeah, we're not done setting up, but
or research.
So just the shelves and books alone, that's the big part. But then all this equipment. We've got all this broadcast equipment. I can show you.
Is that the camera? Oh yeah.
This here. So got all this studio equipment. Move around. Get wired and set up and figured, and we got the green screen which you can't see because you see the background. You still have to get the rest of the green screen up, but we're working on it.
Ooh, now we're red.
Yeah, it's a color shift. So it's thanks to these wonderful, amazing volunteers. It got done. It was most of the move was done except for the technology side by noon.
3 hours?
Yeah, about 3. Yeah, I mean, obviously I've been working down here for days trying to get it ready, but as far as that was a way faster move than last time. And
Move it next year.
I hope the only other time we have to move it is to the warehouse.
Yeah.
And really, at that point, I'm hoping that RPG Research it'll just be the RPG Research. My stuff stays, and we just build up.
Or the phone.
What's that?
So maybe minus the microphone lighting.
Well, no, I'm hoping that RPG Research will eventually have enough money to have all of its own infrastructure. Right now, all of this is my stuff that we're piggybacking on because RPG Research doesn't have any money. So hopefully, over time, we'll be able to have our own infrastructure, have a warehouse, set everything up there.
RPGresearch.com/donate.
Yes. So
to make our dreams a reality.
Yeah. Until then, I hope this is the last time that we have to move the studio. Now, there is a warning. Katie makes it very clear the plan is in 2 or 3 years to move to Seattle. So, you guys will be running this side of the state, and I'd be running that side of the state.
Really makes it important for us to have our own studio.
Yeah, it really does.
It would be really awkward to the new owners.
Yes, it would. Well, Brennan wants to buy the house.
Oh, nice.
Oh. Okay, so
well,
Brennan would not like us.
Yeah, exactly. Although he would probably work out a rent deal for the downstairs or something, being the entrepreneur that he is and capitalist that he is.
I'm surprised
we just have to walk around the house when we're back.
No, it's not to come back. It's just to buy the house.
Oh.
Then he'd probably rent it out to somebody or something.
Okay.
Yeah, he's Mr. Capitalist Entrepreneur guy. But he also has emotional attachments. Like he bought the Bronco not because he needed a Bronco or he could really work on it because he didn't have that much mechanical knowledge. It is the emotional attachment to it, and to show that he could.
Right.
I did not want to sell it to him. And he did not get a steal on it at all. I made out pretty well considering the condition that Bronco was in. So, I didn't rip him off, but I didn't want to sell it. And he had to talk me into it. I'm like, all right, well, it's hard for me to justify hanging on to it now that I have the Infinity SUV. It does everything, and the Bronco can't pull the trailer. The Infinity can. So it was kind of hard to justify. But that Bronco was fun, right? I've had 3 Broncos and take it off-roading, and I don't have to worry about the paint job. And it was a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to drive. But it was hard to justify hanging on to it. So that's why I gave in. And then he drove across the country, and that was another story. But he still has it. He's been getting it fixed up, and the boys have been taking different turns driving it, and they love it. And they've got great memories because I took them camping and canoeing and many great memories in that Bronco. So same thing with the house. Just there's that emotional attachment and to show that he can. Whether or not that'll happen, I don't know. I'm not really comfortable selling that to him, but who knows what will happen down the road. But Katie's making very clear 2 or 3 years. Just so you know. I would rather not. I do not want to move to the other side of the state.
I thought you were slowly convincing her that this is better.
It's all about her family. Right. Her family's old. She wants to be able to help take care of them. They're creaky. And family's number one for her, which is awesome. Sorry, probably airing too much. What's that? I don't know. Who knows what the future will. No, the plan is to sell this and go build our dream home, which has no stairs because of bad knees and stuff. So.
It'll be a weird-looking castle.
Well, it'll be. She actually wants that. She wants a round parapet, round towers in front, basically.
Yeah.
Even though they're facades. So I'm like, cool. So anyway, west side of the state, watch out. We're coming for you.
West side, east side.
Yeah, boy, I need to. That light is too close on me.
Yours.
The one that's giving him a sunburn.
I was like, my lighting actually looks good. I have
yours
color.
is actually doing okay. Yeah, mine is like I'm being irradiated.
Sometimes in the studio, I didn't have color.
Again, we're still kind of getting this all.
Do you want me to sit in it? Because that's the.
Oh, you know what? It's set to the highest settings too. Oh, I got nothing.
We turned it off.
Let's check. I only need one on. There we go. It's had both lights on. It only needs the one, probably. Let's see here. Sometimes it's just the camera settings. Sometimes they will. Yeah, it's the camera.
You're still a little radiated.
It's the camera. So the camera settings have to be dealt with. I wonder if it has any filters on right. Chroma key. There we go. It's the chroma.
Yeah,
But there's no green screen behind me right now, so it's still a little bright. I can play with it later. We don't worry about it. Anyway, we're fine-tuning the studio.
You're on
We don't have...
with Hawk.
Yes, Tech Talk with Hawk. Check it out at techtalkhawk.com. I'm not kidding. We don't have all the cameras working yet. Still, I've got to get some more. I have some USB cables coming in because we need longer ones than before because where we put the tech stations. So we're still getting dialed in. So bear with us. All right, all those preambles. Hello, John. Hello, Danielle. How you doing today?
Alive and well.
Good.
A little sore. My 3 flights of stairs to get to my house, I didn't realize I had overdone it until I started climbing those.
Yeah. So we just finished up a little while ago. 10 a.m. to noon is a researchers meeting. We had Ian and Daniela, who are 2 new researchers to our team. I think we might be up around 10 researchers now. I've suddenly got so many new ones. I think we might be up around. We're over 60 now for our number for volunteers. I think we're at 62.
That's above our
62,
goal.
63. Way.
That's way above our goal.
We were supposed to maybe get to 50 by this summer.
By
And
the end of this summer.
and by the end of the summer, we might be hitting 100 if this keeps up.
Yay.
Yeah. Wow.
All we need is a couple of volunteer lawyers and
Yeah.
CPAs.
Pro bono.
Personal assistants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So much happening.
If we can organize our lives, we'd be very grateful.
So today, okay, that needs to not be there. Can't get rid of it. My keyboard doesn't work. That is no longer accurate. Anyway, today we are doing part 2 in a series on activity analysis. And we did an introduction on this a couple of weeks ago using drum circles, and we read through why activity analysis, task analysis, before you do modifications. We read through all of that in session 1. And then we went through and did an activity analysis of drum circle activity, because that's simpler than a role-playing game, to give people baseline. So if you're not familiar with that, you're going to want to check that out. Now, right now, that's only available to Patreon supporters at the, I think, $20 on up level, the hero level supporters. But after a month or so, it will be automatically available to the general public, as we do with all of our content. But that's part 1. So part 2, now we're going to, as we're leading towards this, we're going to be doing activity analysis of role-playing games. And as I mentioned in the previous session, there's problems with activity analysis methodologies and the tools. I talked about it last session that, like we saw, there isn't reliability between assessors. So that's a low reliability coefficient.
We actually hadn't gotten to the point where we were looking at each other. I don't remember.
Hadn't we? I thought we had.
We hadn't done.
Well, we discussed a couple of them, and there were clearly some differences. And I did some little bit of research since then, and there hasn't been good research done on activity analysis assessment tools. I've been trying to find any coefficient scores on validity and reliability of activity analysis tools from different disciplines. So it comes up, of course, for recreational therapy is one of the big ones, but you also see them for occupational therapy, physical therapy, and other professions, and engineering in other areas. They have activity analysis and task analysis. Now, activity analysis is the high-level understanding of what you need and don't need, and what works and don't work, and then you can look at adaptation, all of that from that. Task analysis is the very specific step-by-step, A to B to C to D, and we're not doing that yet. We will come to that in another future session. We'll go through full task analysis. But first, we're doing all activity analysis. And what we want to do, because this is what I've done before in my private practice, is I have an activity analysis, and then we have a client come in and they have an assessment. And the assessment may be informal or formal. It might be we get a bunch of kids with muscular dystrophy, and that's our level of assessment. And we know that they're going to have a range of functionality. That's assessment information. If we're able to have something more formal where we say range of motion, 45 degrees, load bearing no more than 5 pounds, then that's great if we have that extra detail. Usually you don't get that much detail unless you're in a therapeutic setting. Now, this is applicable for you who are recreational entertainment game masters. This is not just for RPG professionals, therapists, and educators and researchers. Yeah. It is also just if you want to become a better player and game master. Understanding these components will help you find the best game to match your play style and your player's play style and your other interests. Now, at this stage, we are not doing a play style activity analysis yet. However, much of the data that's in this will inform, to some degree, information relevant to play style. Some of the questions that you have to answer in here are relevant to that. So it is useful, and we're going to be doing this for different role-playing game systems. So to start out, as John was holding up there, we are going to start with basic D&D. So there was first original D&D, the box. You know, it's now in a wooden box and such. But the original D&D pamphlet from 1974, but it's kind of a mess, right? It was the beginning, but it jumps all over the place. And to do an activity analysis is going to take us a while because it jumps around so much. So we're going to go to the next iteration where they created Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition and Basic D&D, and they came out about the same time. But Advanced Dungeons & Dragons is, by description, more complicated. They took a lot of the stuff that was in OD&D and added to it. Basic D&D, they were trying to get back closer to the original D&D, but with the cleanup and additions. But they took in a lot less than the AD&D side. You have far fewer choices than AD&D between races and classes. Races and classes are mixed into one. You're either human or you're dwarf or elf. That's it, right? And halfling.
Halfling.
And dwarf, elf, and halfling are your class as well as your species. So, far fewer choices. Now, as you get into BECME, Basic Expert Companion Masters of Mortals, from 1982 onward, the Frank Metzer era of this, they started to layer in their own complexity, and eventually created the rules cyclopedia, which is going back through and trying to clean it up and make it into one cohesive thing, because the others came out in separate little booklets like that, and then you're now flipping between 12 different books trying to find info that's scattered across several books, and that became a problem. It was great for learning. If you're slowly learning the system and you're playing through, the small books approach is actually great, because it only introduces the stuff when you're ready to learn it. And then you just do a little more and a little more, as we are doing for our applied gaming, right. Letting everybody experience. But if you already have learned the system, and now you need a good reference that you can flip to and do things your own way, putting it all into one book's much more effective. Or, you know, Monster Manual versus DM Guide. But having it all in here, all those books put together, is much easier to deal with than scattered across. So the BECME stuff often gets criticized for bad formatting and layout because it's scattered across books. But it's a different approach. It's learning in layers, which neuroscience shows is so important. This is after you've got more mastery, you kind of go to one of these books. So we are going to do this activity analysis of each and every version of D&D initially, and then we're going to do it for other role-playing games once we get that baseline. This is going to take us months. We are going to get really darn good at it, and we're going to get faster at it each time as we go through. And we're going to try to get other people to do the same thing too. And Danielle here is creating a spreadsheet to put our scores into, because, as I was saying, there isn't good research on validity and reliability of these assessment tools. And I know there are flaws with the ones we're using. We're going to try to improve those. And especially when it comes to the context of role-playing game, we're going to add extra fields that don't exist in these. Over time, we're going to add ones that are more directly relevant to role-playing gaming, so that it can help you decide which role-playing gaming is right for your group, for you as a GM and your preferences, and appropriate for your group. This will take a while, and we hope you will enjoy it, and then we will eventually, all this will be shared publicly. I mean, we'll probably publish something in the aggregate, but we share everything publicly, you know, about a month after we do it live. It's then available on our site for free. So join us, if you will, on this journey of activity analysis, part 2. Now I need to pull up my stuff. We're on a new schedule here. The studio's still getting set up, so we got off to a late start. I'm not prepared at all here. I've got to pull up my notes and such from the last session. Okay. So if you guys want to just start talking about the previous session and your experiences with the drum circle and some of your thoughts while I start getting my stuff together here.
Ready for that?
Sure. I was just putting mine in.
Great.
I had the chance while you.
Yeah, so if you guys want to start just saying aloud, like John, if you want to read aloud your assessment,
yep, okay.
And Danielle, you can plunk it in. Okay. Yeah, as you go, and make sure you double check each time so don't get any, get avoid errors.
So This is the activity analysis rating form, figure 7.13. The reference for this is
The cookbook?
It's not in front of you?
Everything is in disarray right now.
I'm just surprised it isn't in front of you, considering what's in front of you.
But this,
all right.
I know everything's in disarray right now.
4.3.
I was just shocked.
I know.
All right. So this is the therapeutic recreation program design principles and procedures by Norma J. Stumbo.
By the way, the
Carol
camera
Ann
can't see it
Peterson.
if you point. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but I can't read it either. It's more
Okay.
important that I can see it to read it.
Okay.
That camera. While he was reading.
So, anyways, there it is.
Stumbo and Peterson, lower your faces. There you go. Lots of I'd probably say 50% of my textbooks at Eastern Washington University, Stumbo and Peterson.
Well,
Stumbo
because
and
they're
Anderson.
local. They're Washington State.
Yep.
Yeah, and Burlingame and yeah. So there's a West Coast, East Coast thing.
Yeah.
Penn State and North Carolina, East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
West Coast, a lot of this. There's definitely regional
I'd just say
biases
that.
big time. And there's big difference in some of the content. Right? They still comply with the CTRS, but they take very different approaches in some of them. So I have many of both.
So the activity analysis rating form, physical aspects. First of all, activity. Obviously, we have to start with what we're analyzing before we analyze it.
Yep.
Drum circle. Drum circles are, of course, groups of people sitting around in vaguely a circle form, making noise together.
More than noise.
It's a beautiful noise. It's a cooperative musical experience. That's why we use it. And for the analysis, what's the primary body position required? It is sitting. We're also looking at standard, middle of the road. Some drums, of course, are tall enough that you have to be standing to use them. Some people are required to sit, stand, lie down, or whatever other shape that they're doing. We're not going.
But we're talking the primary generic
on
all of these, and this is assuming no adaptation. This is just what is the most common recreational application of this activity. All of the other adaptations come after you have made your activity analysis first.
For neurotypical and biotypical individuals.
And physical and, yeah.
So what parts are required? Well, to play drums, you need your arms, your hands, and your upper torso. Those are generally required in that. What types of movement does the activity or activity require? Bending, hitting, reaching, and grasping. What are the primary senses required for the activity? Touch, sight, and hearing. You don't have to taste or smell the drums.
Now this is where we start to vary. This next question is a Likert scale, and we all did them based on our own personal.
This is so some of these are pretty absolute, and they're going to be valid. So, and when you do,
and some of them will be valid.
And when you do an evaluation of the effectiveness of a tool for validity and reliability, you have to look at each section.
Right.
So what you just went through, the first section is just kind of the physical application, and it's pretty straightforward, and should have a high coefficient of consistency, 0.8 or higher, between applicants.
We all have the same one because we went through that.
We did go through it together, so that biases it. Now, over time, we're going to aggregate this from other people without that bias and see what happens. And if you get a wide range of deviation that lowers the coefficient, that means that tool is not good. We generally want, as our standard, a 0.8 or higher coefficient for validity and reliability in different areas for all of our tools whenever possible. Now, unfortunately, in a lot of industries and sciences, all of them, even the hard sciences, all of that, a lot of people are perfectly happy with 0.2, 0.4, or 0.6. 0.2 is barely above random, right? That's just slightly more than random, which is interesting because then you go, oh, well, how do we figure out what the differentiator is? But is not statistically strong at all. And you have people developing entire practices, businesses, and entire industries on data that's 0.2 to 0.4.
Are being done off of research. Somebody says, oh, look, research shows that there's more likely to do A. So we make government policy for or against A, and that's not logical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we are looking, whenever possible, we try to use tools that have a 0.8 or higher coefficient in whatever it is that we're measuring. Validity, reliability, application of the tool, changing, the change of effect from before and after, etc. That's what we're looking for. Now, we will accept 0.6, 0.4, whatever as useful, any data. A 0 is useful data, means we got random.
Yeah.
That means there is no correlation. We weren't able to change the variables. Kohei Kato is a great example where he's got a range between 0.2 change to 0.7 or 8 change, an average of 0.53 change. And so what's important there is to see the areas that had a lot of change versus the ones that didn't with role-playing games for autism spectrum.
Right.
And so some of the areas there was a big effect, and other areas there wasn't that much of an effect. That's important data. So same thing with this assessment tool is as we have other people do the assessments and we find that there's inconsistencies from person to person, that tells us where a tool needs to be reworked until the consistency gets higher and higher. And our goal is to eventually have an activity analysis tool that has a 0.8 or higher in both validity and reliability in different areas.
Realistically, it might be that 50% of this, because of the nature of this assessment, is more of a 0.8 or higher, and then the other 50% we can get to 0.6. Just based on.
I wouldn't say amazing, but the first part, yes. The Likert scale, I'm afraid is going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
We will see.
And that's what I'm saying. A 0.6 would be. That means we ask the question the right way.
0.6 for me is still too low, though.
Yeah.
It's like we're in the right direction.
But that would be.
But how do we get that to a 0.8 or better? Well, none of the others have any scores at all. That's the thing. So if we get a 0.6, we're like, okay, we're heading in the right direction. It's getting better, but I'm not going to be happy till we're 0.8 on every measure. And that's not perfect, right? I mean, I'd love we have some tools we use that have 0.93 and 0.94, which is awesome, right? That's gold standard stuff, platinum standard stuff. But our goal is to try to use and develop and have tools that are 0.8 or higher, because that's pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. Effectiveness and everything in determining the input.
I'm just thinking that Likert scale, as the questions, that if we had a 0.6 right now, I'd be like, whoa, we ask these questions very well.
I don't know. We'll figure all that out later. So John's going to be reading off his answers. Okay. Danielle's putting in the spreadsheet. She'll then be putting the rest of hers in and sharing hers.
Yep.
And then we'll go through mine and share mine and see where we agree and disagree. And then I've got notes for some added fields to add, and then there's some others we can talk about adding before we do the RPG analysis, which we are going to start today. But we need to add things that take into concept certain play styles and other things. I have no pencil. We have none of our stuff here.
It's all in the red.
Okay.
So, and our Likert scale here is not based on, it's a scale 1 to 5, but it's not, our answers aren't based on clean definitions. Like, what degree of strength is needed for the activity? Well, what he's saying is it's incredible strength, like a weightlifter lifting a dumbbell, or
is it strength in the endurance kind of strength?
Right. And is it? We don't have measurable things. Is it 5 pounds, 50 pounds, 700 pounds? What is? If it's a 5, then you should be able to lift 500 pounds. That kind of stuff. Now there are tools like Human Scale here. Which is measurements for how much degrees or percentage of strength it takes to do certain activities, how far you can reach, bend, and all those kind of things, and how to create so you can design items around it. So with that said, this is going to be based on our opinion of what we think it is without any clear parameters to state what it is.
Which is a highly flawed way to do things, but this is what all these industries do currently.
Right.
And we're going to try to improve upon that relevant to role-playing game activity analysis and music program activity analysis.
And this one's relatively...
This is a relatively standard one. This is what is in the textbooks.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This is relatively
This close. Is textbook standard.
We've manipulated a couple of the questions to better fit.
Well, we're going to add some, but this is by default right out of the textbook.
Yeah.
Except we did invert. We should important disclaimer.
That's why I said.
Okay.
We did.
We
Vary
inverted the
some of them.
Likert scale.
Yes. Because I hate
for
the
sanity
backwards.
Yeah, and so does our professor and Professor Emily Messina and such. So what's wacky about the way the textbook does the Likert scale is it does 1 as strongly approve or very much so, and 5 as little or somewhat or whatever, which most people think higher number more of, lower number less of. So we inverted it to be that way. So that is a potential confound in this. We will see.
Well, and there are a couple of the questions we clarified. Come on.
And I, from when I've run this before, I think our reliability has gone up significantly just making that change in the Likert scale. Because I can't tell you how many times I've run this tool with people who we went through and asked them to explain their scores, and they went, "Oh wait, no, I meant the other way. Oh wait, no, I meant the other way." All throughout the assessments, they accidentally inverted their scores.
It's not intuitive at all.
So it was 180 degrees off, and by changing this, far fewer of those coding errors. So really important, these little considerations here. All right.
Okay. Question number 1, or 5 on the chart. The first question with the Likert scale: what is the amount of coordination and movement between body parts required in activity? I'm saying average, which is 3.
I said a lot because of the different types of
What number?
hitting. I said 5.
Really?
Yeah, because of the
Who's this then?
this is mine.
Yeah.
You said
Oh no,
4.
I said 4. Sorry, I
Okay.
said 4.
Yeah.
Yeah,
See,
sorry.
double check each other on these because we want to be. I'm worried about transcription errors here, Danielle. So make sure John double checks everything. Yeah. So we're taking that into account. I have dysgraphia. You have dyslexia. John, keep us sane.
Yes, master. So that's the first score. I said it was average. You say it's above average.
But that has to do with the way that in order to make.
This is the
drum.
minimum. So I want to explain this for the future. And again, part of it's the phrasing of this test that we have to rewrite to be better. This is the minimum requirement to just do the activity it does without requiring mastery. And so
I think it was above average only because in a straight standard drum circle, when you're going and you're hitting the drum, and I'm using the djembe because that's kind of
alternating
average.
hands.
You have to alternate hands.
You don't have to. That's not required for this activity. That's a more advanced technique for djembe.
Well,
we're talking all percussion that we offer, just on average. So this is why it's important. These interpretations, without clarification, you're going to get this variance in response. Now, I'm talking to you as a trainer now to explain to you in the future, as you go forward with that, as far as drumming, this is all you need to be able to do.
But it was
right.
A neural...
You don't even have to hold anything really. Just flop your hand. That's all you need is one hand that can do a beat, which requires some coordination. Yeah. But it's going to be average, is my view. But that, again,
I think it's above average.
Neurotypical
drum circle, you're under the impression that you can follow directions.
Yep.
And when we're doing the drumming, and they're seeing other people doing 2 hands.
Right, but we did talk about do it at your own level, and we had like 3-year-olds playing.
We did.
Who did great.
And who alternated hands.
Later. They warmed up to it. That wasn't required just to participate.
Yes.
I have trouble alternating hands.
I have trouble
alternating but that's growth.
Hands.
Yeah. See, that's a growth development thing. We're talking about what is required just to do the activity at its default level.
Well, but
the kids started out just doing that.
And this is also basic. This is not even hand-eye coordination because I don't have to see the drum to do it.
Well, there is some hand-eye coordination.
Well, that's the next question.
Yeah.
It's
not 0.
We're finding it down
to
like what's the degree of hand-eye coordination. I said that was a little higher than average.
So what I think we should probably do, just so we get through this, is let's just go ahead and go through and do the numbers, and we'll do the discussion of the differences after we've gone through a full set with all of us.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's going to take us forever to get through this. I think let's do it in that batched way.
All right. So number 6, what degree of hand-eye coordination needed for the activity? I stated it as a 4.
I also had a 4.
What's the degree of strength needed for the activity? I said it's below average as a 2.
I said a 1 because you don't need to hold your drum the whole time.
I think it takes a little more. I mean, it's also no. We're not discussing it. Moving on. What is the degree of endurance needed for the activity? Above average, a 4. Number 10. What is the degree of energy needed for the activity? Again, above average, 4. So 4, 2, 3, 4, 4. And then what's the degree of flexibility needed for the activity? A little below average. You don't have a large range of movement that you have to do, so 2. Now that's the physical aspects. Social aspects. What is the primary social interaction pattern required for the activity? We selected intra-group action of cooperative nature by 2 or more persons intent upon reaching a mutual goal. Action requires a positive verbal or nonverbal interaction. What is the minimum, fewest number of maximums to greater number of people required for the activity? Minimum is 3 because anything lower than 3 is not a group. And maximum number is infinity. What? Though I would
except for physics and physiological response, but yeah, theoretically, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just the fact that you can only fit so many people in a space at a time.
Yeah. But literally, they've had thousands of people in stadiums
Technically,
do cooperative
we could have
drumming.
A worldwide drum circle.
Yeah, over the
Everyone
internet.
hits their table at the same time.
Yep.
I'm afraid that would be scary.
And see, and that was in Babylon 5 when Lita Alexander, because she was modified by the Vorlons with her powers, got everybody in the Zocalo going. Like everybody together.
Yeah.
This is a whole scene in Babylon 5 where she's making everybody do this to show off to the captain that I'm in control and you can't stop me. Everybody along with her. That was a major drum circle.
Terrifying!
Because we do body drum circles and ooh, ee, ah, 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 ooh, ee, right? Whatever.
Walla walla bing bang.
Yep. Just all these things apply for that type of circle. Good.
All right. So, what clothing is needed to be socially appropriate? Nothing special.
Anything clothing.
Just whatever, normal street clothes.
Consult your local laws.
Yeah. Pretty much, because like some drum groups in Hawaii and stuff, and they're in California. So my dad was a big fan of nude beaches in the 70s and everything. They had drum circles with no clothes, clothing optional. So it's just whatever the average standard is.
How much physical proximity is required in the activity? Below average, 3. We can maybe spread out a little bit. I mean, 2. 2 is what I said. How much physical contact is required by the activity? Now, see, I misinterpreted this question. I'm pretty sure.
Talking about between the object versus people.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
how much interpersonal?
This is where
we refine the questions.
Yeah, because I have 1 and you have
right, but it's a social aspect. So I was thinking physical contact. I was thinking between them and the object.
Yeah, this is where rewriting the questions to be clear fixes the reliability, the inter-assessor reliability scores coefficient.
You just rechanged it to 1?
Right, because there is
social. No, go ahead and leave. No. See, don't do that.
Okay.
You're screwing up the data. Write down in the spreadsheet your incorrect answer because of your misinterpretation. Okay. That is an indicator of an area that needs fixing. We're looking for these discrepancies. If we don't see a discrepancy, then we're not likely to look at it.
For the original score.
So put the original score of what you tested. We can fix all that later, but we're testing the testing.
Right.
We're preparing to prepare so that we can implement preparation. Spaceballs reference.
What degree of communication is required by the activity? Average degree of communication. But I said 3. What degree of noise is generated by the activity? 5. There's a lot of it's a sound-based activity.
It is totally noisy. Yes.
As a matter of fact, we got
And it
people.
can be deafening.
Oh, can you imagine doing all that in an enclosed space?
I have
Ow.
in echoey basements that are nothing but cement.
I was gonna say, how about the gym floor? Because I've totally done that in the gym.
Oh yeah, it gets you come out. What? I don't know. I don't know. What you're shouting.
You
No,
told
no.
me what you said again.
And these are important considerations of potential problems.
Cognitive aspects. How many rules are required for the activity? Below average. 2.
Okay. It is.
How- My opinion based on what I think of an average.
Yeah. No.
How complex are the rules to understand? 1. They're simple. What degree of strategy is required for the activity? You don't need strategy. 1. What degree of complexity involved in scoring? You don't score drum circles. 1. What degree of long-term memory is required for the activity? What were we talking about? Oh, 1. What degree of short-term memory is required for immediate recall or recalling activity? I'm saying a little above average. 4. Memorizing the pattern for the length of time it takes to beat it. You don't have to memorize it for next week. You're not going to do the same.
Yeah, it's going to be different every time.
Yeah.
Unless you're a facilitator.
And again, since it's the average person, we're not going for the facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
What degree of verbalization is required for the activity? None is required. You can do this all the time. What degree of concentration is required for the activity? A 4, a little above average. What degree of concrete thinking is required for the activity? I said 4. What degree of abstract thinking? I'm not sure about my answer, but I still say it's a little above average, and I said 4. Non-verbal, I gave a 4, and something else I gave a non-verbal explanation. I gave it a 4, but something else gave it a 1 too.
What? Another thing?
Yeah.
You have a. It looks like charisma. That's how you write charisma, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like a little bit.
Been reading your and learning a charisma
No,
one.
he's got to be in his notes too somewhere.
I don't have it in mine. I only have nonverbal.
Well, there's a reason I wrote it. To what degree of each of the following skills use the activity? Reading, 1. Writing, 1. Math, 1. Spelling, 1. To what degree does the participant need to identify or use the following? Shapes, 2. Colors, 1. Size, 2. Numbers. Oh, I didn't even score numbers.
Hurry and do it.
Yeah, 1. Body parts, 1. No. See.
Find it later.
Yeah.
Find it later. Just get through it. We'll go back and talk about it.
Directionality, 1. Symbols, 1. And then charisma again,
Oh, I don't even have symbols.
3.
I think we added some, didn't we, while we
Yeah.
were doing it? Yeah.
And I'm finding out my writing's horrible.
You're
Like
just
I
now
didn't
finding
know.
that out.
Yeah. Black eye, didn't know. I'm going to say I'm going to be off on this myself, just because
Yep.
as I'm rereading it,
Yep.
I'm having.
And so that's called
interpretations.
test-retest reliability.
Yeah.
At least that's partial. That's one form of test-retest. There's different types, and these are really critical things to
Okay,
note.
so give me your score for, or what did you score below it? The or after directional.
There was symbol 1. Ohia. Ohia. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2. 2 I didn't know, but I said I was writing in Arabic.
Okay.
Something 3.
OHIA.
Rhythm. I mean, there's no translating that to English. I can be an OU.
Although rhythm would be a really good one right here.
Mm-hmm. Identifying rhythms. Patterns, I don't know. So, yeah. I think I need to identify or use, and I didn't consider
Do you
use.
have it on yours? The ones we added?
I've got a bunch of written notes in here that I'm putting in and we will talk about.
Okay.
So keep going, because that's why I'm waiting to do mine last, because then we'll go through that.
Affective aspects. What degree of participation have the opportunity or outlet to express the following? Joy, 5. Guilt, 1. I mean, unless you're really feeling like you're abusing that drum. Pain, 2. Anger, 2. Feet, 1.
Fear.
Oh, yeah. Typo. Fear, 1. Frustration, I think it's a little above average when you're starting. Yeah, I'm going to ask you why you feel you're so guilty about beating that drum.
It's not that I think that I feel guilty about doing the drum. I think that music is a way to express yourself, and if you're
expressing your guilt through the drumming?
Music can I don't know.
Because we're talking drumming, not singing.
I
guess you can express anything. Anyways,
people who can't sing do other things.
Administrative aspects. What type of leadership style is required for the activity? Specific activity, skill, expertise, and supervisory, because there is the facilitator. What type of equipment is needed for the activity? Specific commercial product. For example, instruments. They can be made.
Not only that, you don't need instruments.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But in the typical form of a drum circle has
Sure.
an actual drum.
Oh, my fingers.
Yeah, that's where a drum circle would be different than open cooperative percussion group.
Yeah.
Or open music jam. Those would be different than drum circle, where we're explicitly saying that. That would change slightly how you would answer these questions, exactly.
What type of facility is required? No specific environment is required, though there are preferences.
Yeah, library is probably not the best place for it during business hours.
What is the duration of the activity? It's usually for a set time. We're going to be doing between these hours. What number of participations required for the activity? Fixed number or multiples, we say 3 plus, because again, it's not a group if there's only 2. And it's definitely not a circle if there's only 2. Min, max, rather, facility / portability.
Min, max between
Ratio.
facilitator and participants. What is the ratio? Yeah, what is the min-max ratio between facilitators? That's the one we're adding.
Right.
Yeah. We didn't score that one.
Right. No, because these are stuff we were writing down that we needed to add.
Notes, mine are blank, Hawks are full. And then we have the workshop outline. Now I need to step away for about 2 minutes. I'll be back.
Okay. Now that I have written down next My numbers. So the physical aspects, first 4 are the same as John's. And then number 5, I have a 4. Number 6, I have a 4. And this is under the physical aspects still. Number 7, I did a 1. Number 8, I did a 3. Number 9, I did a 2. Number 10, I did a 3. And number 11, I did a 1. I put intergroup for the social aspect. Minimum of 3 and a maximum number of infinity. What clothing is needed? I put clothing. I just don't think drumming naked is my thing, but
Each to their own.
Yeah, each to their own.
It is a clothing optional activity. It does not require them or not require them.
Yeah. I always opt for clothing though.
Yeah.
Number 4, physical proximity. I put a 3, because it's the same amount. There. How much physical contact is required by this activity? I put a 1. Degree of communication. I put a 3 because you're doing verbal and nonverbal, but on a normal scale. What is the degree of noise generated? I put a 5. Rules, I put a 1 because you add rules to go. Complexity of the rules, I put a 1. The degree of the strategy required, I put a 3. What degree of complexity involved in scoring, I put a 1. Degree of long-term memory, I put a 1. Degree of short-term memory, I put a 2. Degree of verbalization, I put a 1. Degree of concentration required, I put a 4. Degree of concrete thinking, I put a 1. Degree of abstract thinking, I put a 2. Nonverbal communication, I put a 5. To what degree are each of the following activities, or skills used in activities? Reading, writing, math, and spelling, I put a 1 for each of those. What degree does the participant need to identify the following? Form and shape, I put a 4. And then I'm thinking about it, I would have put a 3. Colors, I put a 1. Size, I put a 4. Numbers, I put a 1. Body parts, I put a 5. And directionality, I put a 5.
So my ability to identify my feet, my hands, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Or I was also thinking still in the up higher drumming thing of the parts of your hand, because you hit the drum with different parts of your hand to make different noises.
Right, but at the basic level, limb A, smack, object B.
Yeah. And I was going for more advanced on that one. I put a 5 on the opportunity or outlet to express of the following: joy, guilt, pain, anger, fear, and frustration, because I think you can express all of those through music.
Do you want a score symbol?
Score symbol? Oh. And symbol? I'd probably do a 3 on that one.
Okay.
Which I need to add.
Now, you received formal training in this form before
Yes.
in class, and both of you. I don't have formal training. I don't understand sometimes the standard by which people are judging certain of these aspects, but that's okay.
What type of leadership styles are required? I put specific.
You skipped a page.
I did.
Affective aspects.
I said that they were.
Oh, you gave 5. Oh, okay.
I did specific activity, express skills, general activity, skills, and supervisory originally. It looks like I tried to erase general.
It's either specific or general. I don't think you can do both, right?
I was thinking of it as different styles that you can do. Because you can use general skills as a leadership or in leadership to facilitate drumming, I thought. But at the same time, specific does make more sense. Okay. For number 2, I put this is specific commercial product and can be made. I did not put no equipment required because for it to be a drum circle, eventually you do have to probably hit a drum of some form, even if it's a cooler. What type of facility? I put no specific environment required. And what time direction for this activity? I put set time and natural in, because some drum circles are a go until your hands are swollen. What is the number of participants required for the activity? I put any number. I also put a 3+ behind it because for circle more than 3.
Yep. Welcome to the drum triangle. And last page of notes. Did you have any notes?
No, I didn't have any notes. Yeah. My hip is hurting.
It would be nice to have your professor here too.
Yeah, this would be a good one for Missy to here. Or at least to have her score things and then send it in. That would be even more interesting. I think she'd even be interested in that set of data. Alright, ready for yours whenever you're ready, huh?
Okay, I'm quickly writing down the thoughts as fast as I can.
Can you type as fast as you think?
No, not even close.
You wish you could?
Oh my goodness, you know how much I would get done? Although it would be chaos between the overlapping thoughts, but yeah.
Well, the fact that you destroy so many keyboards typing that thing.
Yeah. Did you ever see that Stargate SG-1 where they got the armband injections that made them superheroes? And she like all these computers, she went, brr, 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 and then waited for the buffers to catch up, and then, brr, 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 and then just waited for the buffer to catch up. It was awesome. Like, yes, that, I want that. Oh my goodness, because there's so much here. You know how many of my books would be done? Ah!
I want a similar superpower, the one where the guy grabs the book.
Yes.
I read it.
Well, Data, you know.
Yeah.
Matrix, just jack in.
I know Kung Fu.
Yeah. Show me. All right. So this is the older revision. Again, I've already working on a revised version C. Physical aspects. Sitting. Number 2, body parts. Arms, hands, upper torso. And then I fixed the lower torso, but I didn't mark that. Number 3, types of movement. Oh, I've got activity in there twice, so let's fix that. Well, I see that because I got it.
What does the activity require?
Yeah. So I'm fixing these as we go. That's what I was doing. Number 3, so bending, hitting, reaching, and grasping.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, primary senses, touch, sight, and hearing. Number 5, what is the amount of coordination and movement between body parts required by the activity? I put 3. Number 6, degree of hand-eye coordination. I put 3. 7, degree of strength needed for the activity. 2. Degree of speed needed for the activity. 2. Degree of endurance needed for the activity. 2. Degree of energy needed for the activity. 3. Degree of flexibility needed for the activity. 2. Social aspects, intragroup. Number 2, what's the minimum fewest number or maximum greatest number of people required for the activity? 3 and infinity. And that was informed by, for those of you who we've talked about Avedon interaction patterns and also Tuckman's small group communication. And all of those agree that to have a group, What is the minimum number to have a small to have any group?
3.
The same as at this table.
3 or more. Yeah. And what is a small group range typically, according to Tuckman and such? 3 to 9. 3 to 9 is typically, because then it is, do you just break it into other small groups?
Right.
Right. Efficacy starts to, what happens is people start to break into more cliques after about that number. What is it generally the recommended ratio between in TR and recreation in general between facilitators and participants? What's the number they always like to say?
3 to 7.
Well, they usually say 8. They say that's kind of the maximum they recommend. In fact, often it's in law that says you may not have more than 8 participants per recreation therapist and stuff like that. There's a lot written to that.
So you need a lot of recreational therapists to throw a basketball game.
What do you mean?
Well, there's 2 teams. How many on a team? 5?
At minimum 5 on the court.
Well, not 3 on 3. It totally depends. Typically, you need 2 recreational therapists.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's not a lot, but you need 2. You need at least 1 primary and 1 secondary. And they might all be recreational therapists, but that you've got facilitators. Clothing, any regular clothing. 4, physical proximity required by the activity. I put a 2 as in between people. You know, you don't have to be super close and such. Close versus distant. You do need to be fairly close, not touching.
No. I figured it was the averages sitting.
Yeah, I could go either way on that one. How much physical contact is required by the activity? I meant to put 0. I accidentally forgot to mark it.
You mean 1?
I know, but I'll just say a 1, but I missed
0.
it because I wrote in between people. Number 6, what degree of communication is required by the activity? 2. There's some, more than just nothing. What degree of noise is generated by the activity? 5. We are all in agreement on that one. That one is going to have a high inter-tester reliability coefficient.
As far as for this activity.
For this activity, that's what I'm saying.
I
just
think
for this
also
one.
because everybody understands the definition of what a lot of noise is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, if we get more lay persons, that becomes more problematic because then you have really wild discrepancies. We at least have co-trained in various degrees. And that's an important thing. So a lot of these assessments are done based on professionals. They'll bring in 20 licensed psychiatrists and have them fill out the forms and then look for the deviance between them and responses. They are trained professionals meeting professional standards. You would not do this with laypersons off the street. That will give you erroneous data. Now, if you're doing a general questionnaire, you would do that with people off the street to try to figure out validity and reliability.
If we could get this...
But for this
digitalized?
we want this to work between recreational therapists to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're all trained the same way.
But I was going to say, I think that's something that we should probably aim for.
There's an online version.
I know, but to get this digital with the one that we think is at the time most reliable.
Right.
And do it at the conference and encourage people to do it, and then go into a panel on it and show the data.
Yep.
I think that would be a lot of fun. I'd like to be on that panel.
Well, we are a research institute. That's going to be informative, useful data.
Yeah.
All with it. I'm totally with you on that. That's why we need such a rich digital infrastructure as I've been building.
So that way we could try and remember.
Yeah, if we ever go back and watch it. But it is really important, making a lot of the stuff more digital so we can have it on our tablet and then share it with others. And we will be doing all that
That
over
would be
time.
really interesting to do, like even the beginning of a panel and see if they can, or see what the new...
Yeah, you want to do it like the talent shows.
Yeah,
where everybody punches in.
We could do like the basic one that's based directly on the book, and then do the one that we've edited.
Right, and see how the coefficient changes.
Yeah.
That would be cool. That'd be very cool.
That'd be a lot of fun at a panel.
Yeah, we need a lot of computers for that one.
Yeah.
Although I'm working on it.
You are.
Holy crap. Well, we're moving all the computers and stuff. We're like 12 working laptops.
That's just the working ones.
That's just the working ones. I've got quite a few others that I could get working. They're old, but
Well, and if we do it at the school, they might be...
Maybe they'll provide a whole bunch of loaner laptops. Because wouldn't that be cool if everybody had a station and we'd say, all right, everybody go, we've got you on the page. Click this, here you're on the page. Now, enter your selection. and then we get the real-time data and just be like, who's got talent, but we'd be doing real-time research.
Do a lot less expensive method.
Smartphones with the web, yeah.
Yeah, we do it so that they can go
That's
to a
true.
website.
That's true. There'll be some interoperability. The thing is, if we control the hardware, it's going to be more reliable.
Right.
Because some people's phones aren't going to work right.
Yeah.
Signal would be in a basement. There's, you know, how some of those buildings have no signal.
Oh, that's why
so that's why I say,
I'm hoping for the new,
if we have stations, it's a lot more reliable.
The new building.
Good luck with that. Well, but the new one that they built there, they made it a big giant Faraday cage.
Oh no!
Yeah, the English building or whatever that they built, they just finished a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. It's a Faraday cage.
So
it is a designed Faraday cage. They have signal blockers. This was built into it intentionally.
I've always had signal in it.
I don't know if we're talking about the same building then.
It's the brand new one next to the pub. Between the pub and yeah.
East?
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, the offices aren't. The hallways aren't and the offices aren't. When you go in the classroom, you close the door and the teacher pushes a button, it's supposed to go completely silent. It's a Faraday cage. You can't. If the teacher doesn't want you to have a signal, you're not supposed to have any signal. So, unless that professor was lying, and it was just coincidence, but
I didn't,
or maybe messing with us, which now I'm starting to wonder. But anyway.
I didn't have. I've been in there mostly for Gamers Club.
Oh, okay.
So it definitely wasn't a Faraday.
Yeah, I've had about 8 classes there. It's like, oh my gosh. All right.
We're on.
Well, you can get Wi-Fi in there, no problem. By the way, the campus Wi-Fi is no problem, but it was the other stuff just gone.
Well, you can get on the guest network no matter what.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, in certain classrooms there, you couldn't get anything except the EWU network. Yeah, nothing else. I was like, whoa.
There's a couple in the basement that I've never gotten
that's a whole other thing.
Where
am I at? Cognitive?
You're
number
on
1.
Cognitive, number 1.
How many rules are required in activity 2? Number 2, how complex are the rules to understand? 2. Number 3, what degree of strategy is required in activity 1? Number 4, what degree of complexity is involved in scoring? 1. Number 5, what degree of long-term memory is required in activity 2?
5 is 2.
5 is 2.
1, 2, 2, 2.
No. Well, 1 is 2, 2 is 2, 3 is 1, 4 is 1, 5 is 2.
Okay, it didn't enter. I overwrote 1.
Yeah, John, help double check as she enters there.
Okay.
Because bad data means bad things.
I've gotten it back.
Okay.
Every time I've messed up,
so number 5 is 2, long-term memory. Number 6, what degree of short-term memory is or immediate recall is required in activity? I put 4. Number 7, what degree of verbalization of thought process is required in activity? I put 1. Number 8, what degree of concentration is required with activity? I put 3. Number 9, what degree of concrete thinking is required with activity? I put 2. Number 10, what degree of abstract thinking is required with activity? I put 1. I added what degree of chance, but we'll get to the additions later.
Chance.
Oh, and we did nonverbal.
I've got that.
Chance
I've got a bunch of others. We'll go over the new ones I've added in a little while.
You think it looks like
I've added like
chance.
I've added like 10 that are more gaming related. I put 1. Okay. Number 11. To what degree are each of the following skills used in the activity? Reading, little, 1. Writing, 1. Math, 2.
Well, I put March on here too because
math.
You put March.
No, it's match, but it's supposed to be math.
Okay, so
I fixed it since.
How much math do you have to do?
Counting.
Oh, counting. Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. There is some counting to it. Yeah. You have to be able to just do very little. And when we start doing counterpoint and stuff like that, it starts to get a little, so there's a little bit of numerical processing going on there. It's not a lot, but it's a little bit. Spelling, 1. Then I've got nonverbal and interpretation. I broke those into separate subcategories. We'll get into that later.
Form and shape.
Okay, number 12. To what degree does a participant need to identify or use the following? What?
Putting nonverbal under.
I've got a separate. We'll come back to that later as far as adding. Let's just get through it, and then we'll talk about the additions. 12. To what degree does a participant need to identify or use the following? Shape, 2. Colors, 1. Size, 2. Numbers, 2. Body parts, 4. Directionality 3. I'll look at the other additions later. Affective aspects. To what degree does a participant have the opportunity or outlet to express the following? Now, this one I was torn on because they do have the opportunity to express all of them greatly. So I put really the bare minimum on it rather than the maximum. So this is where scoring, let me see this. I think that the rephrasing would be helpful as well. So I put for the bare minimum to do the activity because that's been the rule all throughout. So joy 2, I put all of them as 2. Joy, guilt, pain, anger, fear, frustration as 2s.
That's another interpretation thing.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. The phrasing needs to be fixed. There is the opportunity, but remember the overarching rule of all this is what is the minimum for participation.
Right.
Not the maximum, because a lot of these others you could reinterpret as the maximum and get a very different score. But this one I was really torn. I'm like, ooh, because it's opportunity. How much is the most they can? Okay, they could potentially their maximum for joy, but I'm supposed to put the minimum necessary for this activity.
And it's
because if they have no emotion to it and such, they're going to miss out because there is an emotional aspect to drumming.
Right.
So, and I don't know, maybe that should be a 1. So I think this should be broken into 2 parts. One should be what's the minimum required. So let's say you're doing drama theater. There's an ability, you must have a minimum ability to be able to express certain emotions to do drama theater activity. It's a requirement. So that's the minimum. What's the maximum opportunity for that? Well, it's a 5. The minimum's going to be, you got to be able to do some, so it's a 2 for drama, etc. And I think that's true for music across the board generally. However, if you're saying what's the minimum to just participate versus the maximum that you could have the opportunity to enjoy and benefit from, well, then I'd put 1 for none. There's none required to do drumming.
Right.
Versus 5, but there is an incredible opportunity to express a lot. Same thing with so I think that needs to be separated or rephrased in some way that differentiates between the min and the max. Because again, the overarching rule is you're supposed to list this by the minimum.
Right.
And this says the opposite in that particular phrase. But so we've got, is rule B overriding rule A? Do I now ignore rule A, or do I still go with rule A? Because or do I go with rule B? And that's where I get confused.
Overrules general.
It doesn't. As we were going through the whole thing, it was saying in general, always remember go back to this is the bare minimum. So this is where if we break it into 2 parts, I think there'll be lower
opportunity to.
Yeah. What is? It's the minimum required. What is the minimum required expression of joy, guilt, pain, anger, fear, frustration to do the activity?
And then
what is the opportunity for what is their maximal opportunity for them to express these feelings?
Right.
Yeah.
And that'll give you a spectra. And I think that's much more useful and will hopefully improve the interpretation of the questionnaire. So, again, down the road, I got a note for minimum maximum on that.
Yep. All
right, administrative aspects. Number 1, what type of leadership style is required by the activity? Specific activity, skill, expertise, and supervisory is what I put. I think we had a debate about whether the general activity, skill, expertise is applicable or not. We can talk about that later. Number 2, what type of equipment needed for the activity? Specific commercial product, drums, and can be made. Yes, I put both. So you can have specific commercial products or can be made. Those both are applicable.
Lots of pens.
Yep. Number 3, what type of facility is required by the activity? No specific environment required. We could reiterate that and say, well, any place that doesn't mind a lot of noise. But they said specific natural environment, a specific created environment, and between the choices that were listed, I think there should be an optional of specific natural, specific created, and then any specific restrictions, right? And in that case...
Yeah, because then you can get, you can do a small soccer game with a tiny ball where you're not hitting it very hard inside of anywhere. However, I'm not going to do it in here.
Right, in the general.
Yeah.
You specific requirement for okay, the water polo match will occur in the pool.
Yeah. Well, that would be a specific created environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can specify that one. Drum circles we can do anywhere. It doesn't need any specific created or natural environment.
And it's like,
But there is a specific restriction,
Right.
which is a place that will tolerate lots of decibels. And there's nowhere in here that takes that into account.
Middle of Arby's might be bad.
let's okayed it.
I said might.
Right. Yeah.
I'm also adding one for any specific legal municipal environment considerations.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to figure out the phrasing of that, but as we brainstorm on these to improve them. All right, what is duration of the activity? It's a set time versus natural end or continuous.
So you don't. Well, we can.
Yep, we'll come back. Number 5, what is the number of participants required for the activity? I put fixed number or multiple of 3+.
Oh.
You can't have a drum circle with fewer than 3 people. You can't have a group with fewer than 3 people, according to all the theories. But you can have any size, so 3+. Now, I also have in here min-max ratio between facilitator participants, things like that.
Those will be good.
Yeah. Okay, and that was notes. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about these. What is the standard deviation for number 1 physical aspects? Do we have any deviation?
There's no deviation.
No deviation. All right, so that's good. We got a 1-to-1 going there. That's great. Number 2, any deviation between arms, hands, upper torso.
Nope.
Number 3, any deviation between bending, hitting, reaching, grasping.
Nope.
Number 4, any deviation between touch, sight, or hearing.
No.
Number 5, what is the deviation on there?
We have a 3, 3, and a 4, so I think it's
0.20. I think that's 0.2 deviation. Yeah. Okay.
0.2.
Please,
do you want
doing
to,
math in my head. Oh my! But anyway, I think it's 0.2.
do we want to actually put that on the form?
Don't write any of the deviations at this point. Just put yes or no if there's a deviation.
Oh, so I'll make.
So just say have a column that says deviation ? And then yes, no, and then we can put in formulae that automatically calculate what the deviation is.
Right.
If it's a numerical one.
If I can spell. Someone spell deviation for me.
DEVIATION.
Nope, that's what I wrote.
Okay.
Oh well.
It's probably trying to spell deviant or something. When you get to technical terms, often the spell check doesn't work properly.
I'm putting ends in line. Yeah, I know, because intragroup, it keeps.
Yeah, and it's not going to recognize that at all.
Okay.
All right.
Deviation.
No,
Deviation.
we already got it. All right. Number 6.
Another 0.2 deviation.
Okay. But go ahead and just say the numbers. Don't worry about the calculation.
4, 4, and 4.
Okay. How many? What? You said that 4 times. There's only 3 of us here.
4.
Okay. Number 7.
Number 7 is 2, 2, and 1.
Okay. Number 8. So anytime it's deviation,
2,
put a yes.
3, 3, and 3.
Okay. Number 9.
2, 4, 2.
Oh wow, that's a big one. Number 10.
3, 4, 3.
Okay. Number 11.
1, 2, 2.
So 100% deviant.
No, it's more so if everything was 1 to 5, 1 to 5, 1 to 5. Anyway, there's a whole algorithm.
Oh no, I wasn't meaning the percentage. I was saying 100% of the questions have deviation.
No.
So,
Of the Likert
Likerts,
scale.
of the Likerts.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. The reliability is not very good. The intertester reliability is not good. Social aspects. Do we have any deviation between intragroup?
No.
Good. Number 2.
No.
No deviation.
No deviation.
Okay. Number 3. Clothing sounds like no deviation.
We all said it the same, or in different ways, but.
Number 4.
2, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. Every time it's the Likert. Exactly. This is the problem.
Mhm.
This is one.
Number 5.
5 and 1.
That's a big deviation. Number 6.
3, 3 and 2.
Okay, number 7.
5, 5, 5, 5.
All right, no, that's the only Likert so far that doesn't have a deviation.
Well, that was number
7.
7
Yep.
in social aspect.
Yep. Okay, cognitive aspects. Number 1.
That's the one about noise.
And you've been
isn't it?
you've saved this. You've been hitting Control S and saving periodically, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna hit it again right
'Cause
now though
I'd hate to
because my
lose all
hands
that
are in
data.
there.
Yeah.
Number 1 in cognitive aspects is 2, 2, and 1. So yeah.
Okay, number 2.
There's a deviation. It's inverse. So it's 2, 1, and 1.
Hey, don't worry about calculating any of it. Just yes or no. Number 3.
Yes.
I mean, say the numbers and then
1,
yes or no.
1, 3. I was
Okay.
just saying that because my brain
Yeah.
needed that.
Number 4.
There's no deviation. It is all ones.
Degree complexity involving in scoring. Yeah. So that one.
Because there is
But
no
that
scoring.
is with drumming. It was very clear.
Mhm.
With other activities, that might break down. Again, we went with a very simple task.
Right,
That's,
Bowling.
yeah. Number 5.
2, 1, 1.
Number 6.
4, 4.
Number 7.
1, 1, 1.
All right, so that one didn't have any deviation because it doesn't require verbalization of it. Yeah.
No.
Number 8.
4, 4, 3.
Okay. Number 9.
4. Oh wow. 1, 4, 2.
Number 10.
1, 4. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 1, 4, 2 again.
Okay. Number 11
5, 4, and
for reading.
No. This is
So
not
11
right.
reading.
1, 1, 1.
And 11 writing. I would hope there's no
1,
deviation
1,
on that. Okay. And then 11 math.
2, 1, 1, 1.
Yeah, I created that one. 11 spelling. In fact, probably all these deviations sound like I probably. I don't know. What's
No, it's not all.
that? Okay. Spelling.
There is no deviation.
Good. Number 12. Shape.
There is a deviation.
Okay.
It's 2, 2, and 4.
Okay. Wow. Colors.
They're all the same.
What?
Ones.
Okay. Size.
Size is 2, 2, 4.
Really? Numbers.
2, 1, 1.
Body parts.
4, 1, 5.
Whoa. Directionality.
3, 1, 3.
Wow. Affective aspects. Number 1, joy.
2, 5, 5.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this. Guilt, is it the same all the way down?
It's not the same numbers, but
Oh.
they are all different. So yours are all 2s.
Yeah.
Mine are all 5s, and John's varies. So it's a 5, a 1, a 2, a 2, a 1, and a 4, respectively.
Interesting. Administrative aspects. Number 1.
There is no deviation.
Okay. Number 2.
No deviation.
Number 3.
No deviation.
Number 4.
There is deviation.
Okay, which between?
I still think there's a natural in some drum circles.
The average drum circle.
Yeah.
The average drum circle just randomly.
When most average drum circles, everybody says we're showing up from this time to this time.
I still think that
If you're talking hippie commune groups, that's a whole
no, I
story.
still think that sometimes they do have a natural.
Sometimes.
And if they're a spontaneous
Sometimes.
drum circle.
Yeah, sometimes. We're talking the average of this activity is a
Yeah.
scheduled set time generally. You have a place in the park or the facility or whatever. Everybody says come between these times, do the activity. And so, yeah, there are certainly more organic groups.
Yeah.
But do you think that's the majority? Or are you talking
Or the
outliers?
average?
I think
My
it's
experience, those are
50-50.
outliers.
Okay.
Really? Yeah, my experience says no. It's 90% scheduled.
Okay.
You have all the outliers that do that.
But I've
Yeah,
also
you got hippie unofficial groups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We are talking
She's a
about
hippie,
facilitators here.
I hang around a lot of hippies.
We're not.
I mean, I
keep
do
in mind,
have a van.
we're talking
club.
about a facilitated group.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
So.
And that's an excellent point, because the ones that have the natural end typically are not associated with the facilitator.
What is the average gracious activity?
Is the average drum circle 2 hours? 6 hours? Our research study in and of its own.
That's why, yeah. And yeah, there's the.
Like for D&D, we can say an average. We have a lot of data on that.
Yep. So those are all extra fields I'll be adding. All right. Number 5.
Number 5.
What's the number of participants required for the activity?
So that does have deviation
Okay.
from you.
Okay.
Because you said a fixed number 3+.
Yep.
That's what I had.
And all of we did do fixed number.
We're good.
Okay, I did
Data
not.
entry error. See, watch out. Data corruption. Gigo. Garbage in, garbage out.
You're the deviant.
I'm the deviant.
I'm the deviant. I don't have tattoos. Do you have any tattoos, John?
I have no tattoos or piercings
Okay,
or any
so you
form
and
of
I are
body
both
modification.
I only have piercings.
And just ears, nothing extra?
No,
And
nothing.
not like a whole bunch of extras in the ears or
Nothing
anything?
strange. I have 2 piercings in my ears.
That's not.
That's pretty average for a
no
female.
tattoos or anything?
Nope.
For
not
your
yet.
age group, you're deviant.
I am.
She's an incredible deviant.
Which is whacked.
I
Because
mean,
in the
that's your natural
70s.
hair color. How?
In
This
the
is my
70s,
natural hair color.
Yeah. In the 70s, if you had tattoos or extra piercings, it would accurately predict. This is personality theory. It would accurately predict your deviant behavior, criminality, things like that. In the 70s.
I just
As
haven't
my
had
professor
money.
pointed out, he says, everybody here, raise your hand if you have tattoos or extra piercings. And, you know, there was a large class, it was 40, or not a huge class, but a large class, about 40, 50 people. All but like 8 of us raised their hands as far as tattoos and extra piercings in the class. They're all younger. And all the ones who then said, okay, who of you do not, we raised our hands, there were 8 of us, we were all older. We were all 40-something on up, 60, what have you. And he's like, that's deviance. You guys are the deviant group now from the norm for this class, right? Now, that is an age cohort thing. But what it does show, too, is that what was predictor in the 70s is no longer an accurate predictor of personality and criminal behavior and deviance and such, because it's become more mainstream, yeah. It's going to go away when all those tattoos get all wrinkly and old and green and gross and...
We can take them off now, real easy.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's
But at the same time,
so foolish.
I wanted my tattoos to mean something, and I knew that if I got them before,
like get a hat or a shirt or something, you know.
Yeah, well, I like the body modification idea. Just money.
But you haven't done it.
Money has
Only because of money.
Money has
Been interesting.
Yeah, because I'm responsible.
When I was working graveyards at
strange.
Kodak, I was on the enlarger. I was the only male to work on their enlarger machine because generally males are colorblind compared to females. But between magenta and cyan, most males have a high deviation in their accuracy. I was the only male they let me work there, and it was a long graveyard shift to an enlarger machine. So I got bored, right? I'm just expanding, contracting, enlarging, color balancing, expanding, all day, all night long. And so I just let my mind wander and notes to myself and stuff. And I lost my train of thought.
Something about tattoos or piercing?
Yes, thank you. So, I sidetracked and then I got really sick, but it turned out to be an inner ear thing. So I got the idea. I wanted to do the Red Hot Chili Pepper symbol, right, which is that radiating block circle thing, and then because I had on my bass guitar and stuff, flea is funk is flea, or flea is funk is flea is funk is because it's circular because he's funk bass guitar. So turns out he's not classically trained and everything before too, which is kind of cool. But I wanted to get that tattooed, and I was newly married and knew she wouldn't be okay with it. So I was trying to get up the courage to have it tattooed to the bottom of my foot so I could hide it. And I just limp and say I injured my foot or something. And the tattoo parlors did not want to do it. They're like, infection and everything else. That's going to hurt so much because there's so many nerve endings and everything else.
No, they won't tattoo anyone who doesn't already have a large amount of tattoos on the bottoms of their feet.
Yeah.
Or the inner part of your elbow.
Yeah.
Or in your armpit.
Yeah.
It's just a bad idea.
Yeah. Infection, everything else. So, but I came close. But this was late night delusional. I'm glad I didn't do it. Anyway, that was the closest I came to doing it. I'm glad I did.
The reason I didn't get any tattoos or piercings or other body modifications is because I was an actor, and I would have to constantly be covering those things up.
Yeah, and that used to be a big deal. Like, you would not get work because of it. Now they have to work around tons of people.
I really want this one eventually, this piercing, but I also really like my teeth, and they're fairly straight.
Yeah.
So if my teeth ever deteriorate, or when I get to be 60 and
worse.
not care, and I have dentures,
you will
or
care
something,
even more.
I am gonna put a hole in my mouth. But
Okay.
Okay.
When I get older, though, I'm definitely.
So anyway,
if I make it to older adulthood,
if you make it.
older adulthood.
So now let's go through and discuss why we did the different answers here. So let's go to the ones that you said yes to deviation. Start at the top.
Okay. All right. Yes to deviation. First off,
yes. Say yes to deviation.
Physical aspects. Question number 5.
Okay. Yeah. So what is
And
the
I'm
amount
the
of coordination and movement between body parts required by the activity? So what did you put?
I put 4.
Okay, John, what'd you put?
I put average 3.
And I put 3 as well. So again, when they're only slightly off like that, that's not huge because it is so open interpretation. Why do you think that was a 4 as opposed to a 3?
So I think of our average movement.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it does encompass the.
See, I think that's the problem is you took it to the requirement for djembe.
Okay.
But look at all the other instruments that aren't djembe.
Yeah.
What's the required movement?
Well,
it's either striker or single hand.
Yep.
You got confounded by the djembe.
Well, and
realized that is not required to play djembe. That is how I was taught by a shamanic healing drummer, is the correct way to play a djembe is the alternating strokes, which is harder. There are other styles that say don't do that. They say you don't have to do the alternating.
Yeah.
So don't get confused between a specific technique style I taught you and the requirement for this activity.
And then the other thing I was thinking is that when you're drumming, you're in a pattern, and to maintain a body movement in a pattern,
the only pattern required for this activity is about 1 per measure.
Yeah.
As long as you can do 1 beat per measure, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 3 measures, right?
Yeah.
To participate in this activity, the only thing you need to be able to do is at least 1 beat per measure.
Yes.
And that's all you need. So understanding that, what do you think your score would be? You still think it's a 4 to just do that?
I still kind of think it's like right in the middle for me, which is why I went to the higher version. It's just I think of it more as a continuous thing too throughout the entire.
We're talking about just doing the basic of the activity.
Yes, basic of the activity for the 1 to 3 hours, right? But so you have to have coordination to maintain.
Yeah, you have to have it.
Yeah,
but you're saying you need higher than average coordination.
Because
so more than walking.
Yes.
You think this is more than walking?
Maintaining an upper body rhythm.
But you think this is more complicated than walking?
That drumming is more complicated than walking.
1 beat per measure is more complicated than walking.
Yes, because I know people who can't do it. I, for a long time, could not do it.
We're not talking about your timing accuracy. We're not talking about timing accuracy.
Yeah.
Just.
Can you make a noise?
Because I'm telling you, I've worked with people with profound brain injuries and impairment. They can't walk. Many of them can't talk. They can barely do a lot of activities. They can't feed themselves. Right? Feeding themselves, just picking up a spoon, things like that. They can't do any of it, and they can drum just fine. Just the basics of it, no problem. So we're
not even talking about being good at it, just making.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure it's kind of, there's part of the, this is a beautiful example of what's wrong with the Likert scale being so relative. My world experience with all these activities, it better informs the range that I would put these in, or changes. Forget the better. That's a qualitative judgment. Sorry. Will change how I perceive each one of these on a scale. Yeah. So if you're 4 years old and you had limited exposure to certain things, that's going to seem incredibly hard. It's going to be like the hardest thing you've ever done at 4 years old. But somebody who's 40, 50 years old, who's done all these other activities and rappelled and skateboarded and martial arts and all this other stuff, that's a pretty easy activity. And the people I work with, I've seen this whole wide range of impairment from people who are profoundly impaired. Like we had that one woman in the wheelchair who had no sensation in her arms and legs, who was playing the djembe quite well. Yeah. Right off the bat, easily. You know, she couldn't walk, she couldn't do all kinds of things, but she could easily play the djembe. Now, she did have prior experience 8 years before her paralysis started and everything. So that's certainly, you know, an important factor. But really trying to think of the minimum, because the purpose of this is we want to match up. So let me put it this way, because this is where I want you to work on your thinking assessment-wise, because it's so important when we're assessing participants that we're all on the same page as far as training you. So that's the only reason I'm hammering on this, because we as trainees need to be consistent. Yes. I want us to find the inconsistencies, and this is a great way to show that we're not on the same page yet. And so that's useful from a diagnostic perspective in that way. And then it's also showing the problems with this approach. When we have set numbers and set things, we've got high reliability. Yeah. The moment it becomes more opinion-based, which is experiential, to draw on experience, deviation goes all over the place. So in training you so that we're on the same page, so that we're doing the same assessments, think about this from, we want to know which activity to match to which kids. And we're going to be working with different special needs kids of different level of function. If you rate this as a 4 for drumming, that means most of the kids we work with are not going to be able to do this activity. Without changing the activity in some way. Yeah. Most of the kids will not be able to do this activity. Does that still sound like a 4?
Probably sounds like it.
Yeah. And even a 3 is on the higher end, I think. I was giving it because of the range, because some people have trouble with timing. Yes. That was why I kept it at a 3. If timing was an issue, if you just hit whenever you wanted, I would have dropped it to a 2 easily. But the timing brings it up to a 3 in my mind. That is harder for some people to, even just the one beat, to get it in the ballpark.
And for using,
even though we're hardwired for it. What's that?
I still, I'm seeing the 3, and I think I was thinking a little bit more about the general drumming that we do.
Right. We take it to a whole other level. Yes. As drum facilitators, we're not the most advanced drum facilitators by any stretch.
No. And on the other hand, I was using us as
on the other hand, we are more advanced drum facilitators than other groups too. So we're kind of in the middle of the road between. There are groups out there making a lot of money as drum facilitators who do a way more basic program than we do. Way more. And then there are others who are making a lot of money who are way more advanced. They are master percussionists and they're awesome. Some are making a lot of money, some of them do it for free, whatever. We're kind of in the middle on that, right? We have a fair amount. We've got some games. Some of these groups never do those games. Some of them don't do that at all. They show up and they just do mostly grooves. They barely facilitate. And they get a lot of money for it. We do. We've got all these games and activities, and so, but we are not master percussionists at all. So there's that other extreme over here. But I think that's good for what we do. That middle of the road, I think, is a good balance, and it makes it so we can do a longer circle because we have more interesting things to do. Yeah. But so keep that in mind when you're looking at 1 to 5. This is creating barriers. The higher you put a number means when we do a cross-reference of somebody's abilities, their ICF, ICD codes, so 0 through 4, which you can just turn that 0 through 4 for a 1 to 5 almost in a way. Yeah. If they have a 4 impairment, well, obviously they can't do any of it without assistance because that's how the scale works. But we want to know which activities they can do for their level of function. And if you put it at a 4, that's a lot of populations that won't get to do activity wherever you go to a 4. So keep that in mind at that threshold. You put it at a 3, that's pretty average. And then if it's below 3, that means the average person, it's going to be fairly easy. And we want that cross-reference to be consistent between us when we're doing assessments. Again, this is the problem with this type of scale. This is a beautiful illustration of it. And thank you for being the example.
One of the things that you did, and we'll have more of these, is that made it clearer for her was what is average? You said walking is considered average coordination. Having that definition of what average is.
All right. So the Likert scale, then that is another problem here. The Likert scale needs better examples. So Likert scale needs better examples of is 5. Yeah, I agree. Because some of the tests out there will tell you exactly, can do this or this in this range, this score. And this doesn't do that at all. So that's another way I think will greatly improve our Likert if we give people what that means for each one. Now, here's the tricky thing. Assessment tools can get really long and be really highly accurate, but be way too long. And you'll see a lot of them in the Red Book. They talk about where they had a battery of 1,300 questions they started with. And then they went through and reviewed them and got them.
You would think that the fatigue alone would reduce the accuracy.
Well, these are professionals.
Right.
What they did is they brainstormed every variable they could think of. They aggregated through literature review every variable they could think of related to whatever it is they were researching. Then they ran those tests for accuracy. And then they went, oh, it had a really high accuracy. Is there any way we can make this test more manageable? Because that will take, like the MMPI is a huge test.
Right.
It takes forever. And so they have reduced versions, and then below a certain it used to be much larger. They've reduced it, but you start losing some of the reliability and validity if you go too short. So you have to be really careful. Where's your cut? Where do the numbers start going the wrong direction?
Right.
So same thing with this. Is eventually we're going to have a thing that's really long, and then as we're testing it, we might be able to whittle away some to fewer questions that still hold the accuracy. So in the Red Book, it shows an example of where they had like hundreds and hundreds of questions. It took hours to take the test, but it had a 0.96 reliability and validity, which is phenomenal. But they're like, oh my goodness, this is way too long. So then they dropped it to like 12 questions or something really fast, and it plummeted to like 0.3. Right? And they did kind of back and forth, trying to pare it down, back and forth. They went through multiple iterations. This is one of, I think the LIM or one of the others, to where they finally settled on like the 24 questions or the 36 questions or whatever, because and it still had about a 0.93, 0.94 reliability. So they got it way down from hundreds of questions down to 20 or 30 questions through trial and error, iteration, do the scoring, and eventually found out, and it's kind of like what's the minimum amount for role-playing gaming and still have the maximum efficiency. It's exactly what I did with RPG optimization. I went one extreme, then the other extreme, and then kind of zero in. And now we found the sweet spot. And it's the same thing with this. So we don't have the big giant brainstorm version that they do with this because they don't share that. And also we're testing some things that maybe they never would have thought of because a role-playing game has its own isms.
Right.
So ours is going to be a little bit different, but it will be very applicable to role-playing gaming. We will try to include other activities to compare and contrast, but we want one that's really good for testing role-playing gaming reliability, validity for different populations. From game to game to game to game, we want to be able to go, this game is the best for this. And so ours is going to be a little bit different, but still, it's the same process. But it's really good to do this anyway to show if we, as co-workers, are on the same page.
Which obviously we're not completely.
Which is to be expected, right? Especially with Likert. So as John pointed out, one of the great ways to fix the Likert is to give examples of that range. To say 1, this range, 2, this range, 3, this range. Now you have examples of what a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 means. That's going to inform your decisions more accurately. It's going to be consistent from person to person to person. So that's something else to add to this to better improve it. Now, again, through training, we can end up on the same page anyway, but we want this to be, especially as volunteers and people come and go, we want this to be working with all kinds of people related to what we do.
I think especially using the physical aspects, we did use like the
examples
walking as 3.
Sure.
Just kind of as
a
baseline.
Well, I'll work on that. I'll work on creating better
I think even
explanations
having
of that.
1 in there as a baseline, as the average, would
right.
be the.
I agree. That will be something we will do. Okay. I think for each category, we will give an example of the Likert range just for that category. So for physical aspects, we'll have one example, and then you go through the rest of them. Then for cognitive or social, you do the same thing. So every time it's a Likert scale for a different category, we would give one example of the ranges so that somebody has a reference point. I think that will give us a much more reliable intertester reliability score. All right.
Relay hand coordination. I put a 4. I put it down as a little above average hand-eye coordination.
All right.
And you put down
3.
a 3.
Yep.
Okay.
So we had little tiny kids there, like 3 and 4-year-olds, banging away. Their coordination is not great, right? Some of them can barely walk, and they're banging away on the drums. And some of them were not doing rhythm at all, but if you notice, some of them started to fall into it anyway.
That youngest one?
That one kid really took off.
It.
Yeah, and there's exceptions, but the other kids, all of the kids fell into it fairly quickly. They got there. These are little kids compared to adults. And again, we're talking neurotypical here. So for me, that's still a 3. If little kids can do it, yeah, it takes a little more effort. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but we are primally hardwired to do this activity. So from my perspective, it's a pretty average. It takes some effort. It is a 3. It's not a 1 or a 2. Some people struggle with it more than others. But it's not
my answer.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, well, I think the number one thing you guys are tripping up is you're so self-conscious about the timing.
Well, not just the timing.
Really?
Other parts of it with
Danielle,
coordination.
the most basic version of this,
yeah,
when you're just doing one hand, beat 1 per measure. Is that really that hard for you? I'm not talking about timing. Forget timing accuracy. Just moving your hand to hit the drum. Is it hard for you to hit the drum accurately? I don't mean super accurately. I'm just saying to hit the center of the drum.
You can make your hand
hit where
you want on the drum.
Yeah, because for some people with spasticity, they can't do that, right? And that is very hard for them. Yeah. And so I wouldn't put a 1 or a 2 because somebody with spasticity wouldn't be able to do this activity without adaptation. It would be very frustrating for them if it's bad.
I'm going to agree with the 3 on here because again, in the most basic form of it, of just putting my hand to the drum, that's a 3. Maintaining a rhythm is a 4.
Maintaining a rhythm,
but
that is hard,
question.
but it's not a question on here exactly.
Yeah. And part of the reason why I did 4 for the hand-eye coordination is I was also thinking the most basic ways to hit a drum. I was thinking multiple of them and being able to distinguish and use them.
The most basic way to hit a drum is hand drum.
No, I'm saying I was thinking of the 3: the cup, the flat.
That's more advanced.
And see, I thought
I taught you advanced techniques.
Okay.
Those 3 hand techniques for a djembe are advanced. Anybody can hit a drum. Can you hit a pot and pan together?
Yes.
That's a drum. Don't confuse the more advanced training I gave you. It's not super advanced, but you got more advanced training.
Yeah.
And yes, that was harder. That's why it's more advanced training.
Yeah.
That is not what's required to do this activity.
I was putting that at a 4.
As a facilitator, it's required.
Yeah.
Is it required for them to play? Right. Can everybody play with just this?
Yeah.
That's what you got to think about. Every time you do this activity analysis, you just got to think at the basic level, what's required just to participate. Because again, if you set the number higher, you're going to exclude people who could have done it. So you want to really think about that number of, am I excluding people who could do this activity at a lower level?
Question, as far as our documentation here. What we've done is, when it comes to this Likert scale, is that we have original scores and the deviant yes or no, but do we want to put in the agreed upon score?
Well, we can put an average. We can put the average score. Yeah, we can. So we can do like a revised score if you want.
Yeah, revised score that says.
All right. Okay. So if you want to put after all 3 of us, agreed revised score, we'll have one that's the mathematical average of our scores and the means and deviation, all that. That's all auto calculator. But let's just put a column that says now that we've talked about it, the agreed for our matrix purposes. Agreed. Revised score. Yes.
Because when we reference,
good point.
When we go back to reference these things and say, hey, which one are we going to choose?
Yeah.
We don't want to go for the one where we all go, ah.
Yeah. So that's a good point.
And I'm only going to do those for the ones with deviation.
Right. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, if we agree, we agree.
Yeah. I'm just saying I'm only pulling the data over
Great.
for the ones with.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, so number 7, I am the outlier. This is degree of strength needed for the activity.
Okay.
I put 1, and you
Okay.
guys put 2.
Okay.
And I don't think you have to hit the drum hard to be able to make
True.
sound, but
True.
you do have to be able to hit the drum. But I was thinking that it's as easy as not taking your hand off the drum. This I went to the opposite side.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
What would John put? What I put?
I put a 2.
Yeah, that's what I put.
It requires some strength to lift your hand.
Yeah. Especially as you do a program, you're going to get fatigued pretty quickly if you're on the low end of the strength. It's not that you can't do it. So I wanted it to be as inclusive as possible, but you do have to have a little bit of strength to be able to raise and drop and keep doing the activity. And so my experience
I think
is,
we're going to go with it.
if I went with a 1, that would indicate that you don't need any muscle strength to do the activity. And I think very quickly, if we bring in somebody who has extreme muscle weakness, they'd be very frustrated with the activity, exhausted within minutes, if they could even do it.
To me, would be watching a movie.
Yes. Yeah, a passive activity where you don't do anything.
Yeah.
This is barely above that. Again, 1 is almost a 0 in a lot of cases. So,
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it's not a 0. It does require some strength, but it was just barely. I mean, if I could have done a 1.5 or something, I would have. And that's where you can certainly do a larger Likert scale of a 7, which is more typical.
I think a 2 would have been appropriate on a 10.
Why isn't it done on 10 and then you can go by percentages?
Yeah. It's just there's choice overload for people, and again, there are reasons to consider a 7. So there are various Likert scales between 5, 7, 9, all of that. 10 becomes a problem with Likert scale because of the middle thing. Anyway, there's a reason to have it be odd numbers, but that's a different story. Okay, so you agree with the 2 then?
Yeah.
For revised? Okay.
And I kind of, So the next one is the speed needed for the activity.
Okay.
Both me and John put average speed.
Okay.
You put below average speed.
Okay.
And I know that we can adjust the rhythm to the participants and the speed that we usually do the count at. But I think that
90% of the time, this is the speed required. I occasionally sped that up a little bit, just for fun.
Yeah.
But for 90% of the activity, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. That's going to confuse you. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Is that a lot of speed?
No, but I also saw a lot of people going 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
4.
that was their choice.
Mm-hmm.
What is required to participate? Remember, when you set a higher number, you create a barrier to somebody with lower functioning that won't. Our algorithm will say, don't participate in this activity. It's too hard for their level of function at this stage. So always think of it. If you go a higher number, it creates a barrier. On the other hand, you don't want to set it so low that somebody who can't do it gets assigned the activity. You want it to be a barrier for people who shouldn't be doing that activity. That's what you have to be looking at here, is why we're doing this, is to figure out what is the lowest we can go to make it as inclusive as possible without bringing in people who shouldn't be doing that, should do another activity instead.
So I said it was average. You say it's below average. What is average? What's an activity that demonstrates an average speed? Walking.
That's always a fairly safe one, and that's faster than that drum pattern I just gave you. Because walking is walk, 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 walk. Maybe a leisurely walk, 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 walk.
Which you could say is the 2 beat. So 1, 2.
Well, you could break it into all kinds of things. Sure. Yeah, there's lots of ways you could break that into. So, but part of it is it's also this kind of speed, right? Throwing a baseball, swinging a bat. You got to think of, martial arts, what have you. That's fast, right? That's a 5.
That's a 5, yeah.
When you're doing those kinds of activities, you need some real speed with those things. As opposed to, like you're saying, watching TV doesn't require any speed.
Yeah.
But you can very easily.
So, what we're looking at is faster than watching television, but slower than walking, so at 2.
That's what I was thinking. Okay. What do you think? How do you feel about that?
With an example of what an average speed activity is, I can feel more comfortable with the 2.
Okay.
I feel
Danielle?
kind of comfortable with the 2. At the same time, I still think that we're going with an average of the people around them. And if we can throw... I'm thinking of it as you're sitting in a group.
So stop doing that. Because what is the purpose of this assessment?
You take people out who should be.
Well,
and
take them out. Wrong game. To determine how to best match the right people to the right activity.
Yes.
That is the purpose of this. This is part 1 of then we assess their abilities, and then we look in a matrix to see which is the best match.
Can you meet the minimum requirement
to do this? Do you meet the minimum requirements of this activity without it being completely overly burdensome and such, but still challenging and all of that? Always look at this as from that perspective. That's the whole point of these assessments. And what do you think of that?
Well, and see, that's where I was going with it. I'm afraid that if they got in a group, right, and we're just saying a basic group of average people, and and you're trying to keep up with the people next to you, essentially, and create the rhythm at your level, and being in a group that was of average people, sometimes I don't feel like I can keep up with what I want to play.
Yeah, and that's a normal response. So I've been in hundreds of drum circles.
I put a 3. And
most of the people had no prior music or drumming experience.
Yes.
This was a new thing for them. And they all had the exact same concern. Oh, I can't keep up with it. And at first they did screw up. But very quickly, they figured out how much. So they learned, as we keep telling them, don't try to copy everybody else exactly the way they're doing. Don't try to copy exactly me. Find what works for you. Go at your level. Then as you get into it, try pushing yourself a little. Push it a little more. And if you stumble, then back it off a little.
Also, I think it's a difference between the minimum requirement to do the activity versus to be good at the activity.
Yes. Yeah. And what you're talking about is being good.
Be good at it.
Not great, but just being good at it. Right. And that's what you keep thinking. And I'm trying to tell you the minimum. We're trying to establish the minimum required for average participation in this activity. Not the average level of the activity, the minimum requirement for average participation in the activity, non-adaptive. There's a big difference between the two. You keep talking about the average level of participation, not the minimum for average participation. Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Because if this is all I can do, I'm not a good drummer. I'm not doing anything that's exciting or fun to listen to, but I am participating.
So the next one is what degree of endurance is needed for this activity. And this is where we differ. Fox says 2, John says 4, and I say 2.
Which one are we on?
Endurance.
Maybe I don't have any endurance. So I think it's 4.
Number 9, endurance. Okay, what did John say?
He said
above average endurance.
Okay, what did you say, Danielle?
I said a 2.
Okay, and I said 2 as well. Okay. As facilitators, I agree with you fully. It is a 4 or 5.
Yes.
It is exhausting. And our longer sessions that run 2 hours, which are considered fairly long, do require more stamina, definitely. Most of the groups are 1 hour to 90 minutes. 45 minutes to 90 minutes.
That would have informed the question better.
I know.
How long is the standard session?
So let's put that. So
I'm a little okay. So I'm on. I think that this is in the order of importance to the to looking at it post doing it.
Sure.
When you're looking at an activity and it might be
remember this. Okay, so here's one of the problems with what we're doing. This is like step 3 or 4 in the entire program plan process. And in that, we've already established what the minimum times and sizes. So we would have had a lot of other data already, and we kind of jumped in the middle here.
Okay.
So that is normally when you do the whole program process through the cookbook already answered, because your EOs and TPOs and all that stuff are all part of it. So this is part of a stack like this, right?
Yeah, if we're talking a 30-minute session,
so that makes it tougher because we're doing this in the middle without it being informed. So we don't have those consistencies about duration. The average drum circle will be 45 minutes to 90 minutes. That's pretty average. If you look at the library and meetup groups and all these others, they typically have like a 1 hour to a 90-minute slot. 2 hours is pushing it. Now, we did 2 hours because people were coming and going anyway. Right. So we were an open park thing and people were coming and going, and that was fun.
We technically almost did 3 hours.
Well, I mean, I was there since 8:45 a.m., so that's a whole other thing.
She's talking just the drumming.
No, but I was doing a little bit with people as they came and went.
Oh, okay.
Throughout the day.
Well, that's why your hands were so...
Oh, my gosh. They recovered pretty quickly. I was surprised.
I
considering how little I drum now.
Doing that drum and picked one with the mallet, and I was like, oh, much better.
Yeah.
This is
I should have done that, but I was, trying to keep the energy going, so... Anyway, 2 hours is a long session for drumming. If you're just doing a mellow groove, it's not so bad. But a facilitated group like we're doing, it's a workout. Not just for the facilitator, everybody there was feeling it. Now again, not everybody was there that full duration. As a facilitator, it's a 4 or 5. It is a physical, very physical activity. You get better at it with practice, obviously, and in better shape. So, but this is, what's the minimum? Assuming 45 to 90 minutes being the average. You didn't know that because we didn't go through the other steps of this process. That's where this also breaks down, is when we don't have those clearly defined parameters. I'm going to go ahead and add fields in here in the description so that even though we don't have the full earlier steps, that little things like that help inform your responses. Right. And I think that'll help improve accuracy on
if
here.
We're going to,
we're overhauling this.
Yeah, no, but I mean, if we're going to test this at the convention...
Yes, we want it well worked out.
I think that
it has to be all in one. Yeah, it has to be all in one. We can't assume they know what the other contexts are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to stand on its own.
Yep.
This assessment has to stand on its own. But by design, the reason why this works better in the cookbook is because you have all those other steps that you're going through before you even get to it.
Yes.
Right. So you get better consistency with that if you go through the whole cookbook. We're trying to make this assessment tool stand on its own. Not easy to do. And it will make it considerably longer in trying to do that. But it's worth it for how much analysis we have to do in training all our volunteers. So this is a wonderful conversation. That being said, we're actually running over.
Oh my goodness, we haven't gotten to the other ones.
We haven't even gotten to BECME. We're still working on the assessment tool.
Yeah.
Right? We haven't even gotten to that now. But that's okay, because now that we're going to have to stop here. I'd like to go through the rest of it. We're just going to have to do that next time in part 3. So we actually... Tell you what, let's hurry. Oh, yeah, we're doing it again tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Let's just get through physical and call it good. Is that all right?
Yeah, let's get through physical.
I might be a little late coming back. Because...
That's fine. Well, remember, we're 7 to 10 for that anyway.
Yeah.
So
but
I will try to remote in.
3 hours.
Yeah. What's that?
I will try to remote in.
Okay, that's fine. For this,
Ignore
that'll
the
work
fact
fine.
that the back of the vision will be the back of my toilet. And you put a green screen over my...
How about you run in audio-only mode with your mute on? Have you watched Happy? Have you seen the show Happy?
No, I'm avoiding that
It's
show.
so warped.
And it's so
I
good.
love it. It is so warped. It is so disgusting. And Katie and I love it. And Katie cannot stand gross things. And she can't stand watching people brush their teeth. So this scene, did you see the scene where the thing comes out his rear at the toilet and all that? That horrible. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so gross. Oh my goodness, that is so gross. And this guy was in Law and Order or whatever.
Yeah.
He's a straight-laced guy normally. He's awesome. He's doing a great job. This guy has rage.
Makes me like.
Oh my goodness.
Cry,
it's so gross. It's so bad. And we can't stop watching it. And Katie so she said that scene was less gross than watching people brush their teeth for her. Right?
Whoa.
Sorry,
so
Katie, I'm sharing some of your personal notes. What?
Are we all agreeing to 2 on that one?
You guys tell me.
Endurance?
Endurance, 2. Now that we have understand
Danielle,
the
how do you feel
parameters
about
of
that?
how long you have to do it for.
I mean, this is peer pressure, so.
Yeah. I said
John,
2 to begin with.
Okay, so John, now you have the parameters. That made more sense to you? Okay. All right.
Degree of energy needed for the activity.
Now that we've adjusted the parameters and what the speed is,
Yes.
that brings it down to a 2.
You had that as a 4 as well?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Which I totally understand,
and
because
I have it as
a 2-hour session, what?
I have it as a 3, and
Okay.
keeping in mind that it was a 1.5 to 2 hours.
Right. Okay. Yeah, 2 hours is pushing it.
Yeah.
That's pushing to a 4 for anybody to keep up that energy. Yeah, but 45 minutes to 90 minutes, most people can do that.
Yeah.
So, are you also changing your answer to a 2 on this one?
Energy? No, I thought we said 3 on energy.
We did.
Hey, speaking of which,
I thought that you were done at 3.
We did.
technically
too.
we're just running a little over and wrapping
Okay,
up. I'll
that's fine.
stop shortly.
I have a couple of more errands to run, but I brought you salmon and rice for dinner.
Oh, thank you. Thanks,
So-
love. You're not sticking around, though? Are you going to be back?
I'll be back. I've got errands that I am in the middle of.
Because then we resume at 6, but...
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
fine.
All right.
I just wanted to get the salmon here before it.
Just want you to know we are on the air, just so you know, dear.
God.
And I have been talking about you, sorry.
I hope it was nice.
It was, well, we were talking about Happy
Oh,
and
yeah.
how
It's gross.
the scene with the toilet was not as gross to you as somebody brushing their teeth.
This is true.
I was trying to put it in perspective, and I'm like, what? So, love you, dear. See? All right. So wait a minute. Well,
he said a
I'm
2.
sorry, endurance 2. Yeah, endurance 2. I thought we were at energy.
Okay, no.
Endurance 2, I agree. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, and then the last one is.
Well, 10 was
what's-
energy.
10 is energy. I
Yeah.
originally put a 4.
Okay. I said 3.
I said 3.
Okay.
And then John said 2
No, for 10. He said
For
4.
10.
for 10.
No, originally I said 4.
Right.
Well, after the discussion, after we
Yeah.
we know that the parameters are a much shorter time,
Yeah. You now
and
think
that
a 2.
the speed is a much lower speed,
Okay.
a 2 or a 3 for energy.
Right.
And
I said
I
3.
concur with
Yeah.
a 2 if we're going to the lowest. Because I think if we're going on the lower end of
Okay.
That's a 2.
I
For
think that's a
45
2.
minutes?
Yeah.
We
Well,
did-
again, the next. Okay, so average walking.
Yeah.
A 1
For
is
45
watching
minutes.
television.
What's the degree of energy?
So
Yeah, I think it's going to be more than a 2 for
so
45
3.
minutes.
Yeah, for 45 minutes, let's go an average 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why I was suggesting a 3.
Okay.
Again, I am totally open to changing my vote on this too. I just want us to talk it out and figure it out logically.
I think it's more of a 2.5.
So you think it's the same energy as
I
45
really
minutes of
am-
walking?
I
reality.
think that's probably pretty accurate.
Okay.
I think it's like right
Yeah, your
after
arms
the
are going
rest.
to get. You're going to feel it after 45 minutes.
But I'm only
even if
using
you're
half my
alternating.
body.
Well, you might switch off and stuff, but
Yep.
yeah. It's not going to be as much heart rate, but the parts involved are going to
Okay.
feel it.
What is
Okay,
the
so
degree
3
of
is what we agreed.
flexibility needed for this activity. I said a 1. The rest of you said 2.
Okay.
And the reason is that you can do it just by doing this
Okay.
for the mallets.
I'm going to almost say that flexibility, that's almost a 1.
I'd say it's almost a 1. But if somebody has, like,
And we're talking.
because again, I want to make sure we isolate those that shouldn't do it.
Yes.
So a 1 indicates that if they have a major problem with their tendons or something, like cerebral palsy,
Yeah.
where they can't move beyond a certain range at all, they're locked, or some disorder
The
like that.
paralysis.
A 1 means they can still do it.
I think that they can still do it. If
It's going to vary on the individual, is my
Yeah.
only thinking on that. So I agree with you. It's close to a 1. Again, this is where a more refined scale would be useful. I think it's more of a 2 on a 7 scale. But I wasn't comfortable putting a 1 because I felt that for those that had certain minimal range of motion issues, flexibility, that there should be a slight restriction.
Okay.
That was my thinking. I'm open
Yeah.
to discussion on that
I
if
think-
you'd like.
that with this activity, if they have the endurance, even
And the
though they
strength.
might be using their upper body
Mm-hmm.
instead of their arm,
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is a way. Like when we
But
with the
isn't-
other person who
Isn't
had
this
the
still, I have to be flexible enough to do this?
Mm-hmm.
That's
This-
flexibility.
I think that they
It's not a large range of flexibility because
The-
flexibility
usually you
is.
don't have full
let's look at
body.
so let's look at it another way.
Okay.
Watching television doesn't require any flexibility at all.
Yeah.
There's no range of motion to worry about. You can have no flexibility. You can use voice controls whatever, you don't need any range of motion
You have to have a range of
flexibility to
motion
do television.
for
You must have at least some flexibility to do this activity. Does that make sense? And again,
Yeah.
I agree. It's really close to a 1. You know, it is not a 0. So again, with only a scale of 5, I was like, well, it's not quite
the
a
scale
1.
doesn't give us a 0.
Yeah.
Because
Which would be television.
flexibility.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there are activities
So
that
again,
require 0. So
I'm erring on the side of there is a requirement for some flexible movement, even though it's not much. And it's certainly below average necessary.
Yeah.
So
It's
that's
way
why I went with
below
the 2.
average.
Again, if we change this Likert to a more refined Likert, maybe that's
Well, if we do it with
a 7.
a 7, or even adding a 0, I think that for some of these.
Yeah, well, let me research. So let me research
because a 0 would be
Likert
also
7,
an A.
Likert 7 versus Likert 5 and 9 versus, because remember, Likert doesn't actually use numbers; it uses somewhat less, somewhat more.
Yeah.
This isn't technically Likert; it's a hybrid, but
Something with
versus
NA.
0 to whatever. What does research say is best approach? I have books on this crap. I don't know if I'll get to it, but I will try. Because tonight I have to prep for the whatever game we're doing tonight, which I don't even know what it is yet.
Well, you were supposed to do.
Did we pick it? Which one?
I thought you were doing steampunk.
Is it steampunk tonight? I have no idea. I don't know what I put in the calendar.
Maybe we should just do basic GURPS first.
Well, the steampunk was GURPS.
Yeah, they're all GURPS this month. We're doing GURPS.
It looks like I didn't specify. I don't think we hit assigned yet. Yeah, nothing's assigned yet.
Well, what if we did GURPS with no? Well, if we can't do.
Are we trying to say what's the most basic form of GURPS?
Yeah.
GURPS Lite.
Okay, so GURPS Lite, but what?
But we have to pick what we're going to play. So we do GURPS Lite for one of the ones. Again, I've got like 12 GURPS things we could go through. This is kind of GURPS month. We'll be doing a lot of GURPSes. And we should probably start with GURPS Lite first and then go into full GURPS. So...
You have run GURPS before, right?
Yeah, it's been a while. Brendan ran it all the time. It's his
I ran it once.
It's Brendan's favorite. He especially loved run the World War II stuff.
I like GURPS because you can.
I'm just trying to think what I can have ready between now and 6 with Katie coming over.
It sounds like it might just be you and me, though.
Because you're not able to be here tonight?
It's tomorrow night that I won't be able to be.
You're here tonight.
Yeah, I'm here tonight.
Okay.
So we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as I get fed.
That can be arranged, too.
There's pizza.
Yeah, well, no, we've got salmon.
Yeah, that's
so, I've got my...
So, the next time we sit down for this, we're just going to kick off with social aspects, get through the rest of this, of the reason why we scored it, or are we going to...
Yeah, we're going to finish conversing and getting our standard that we agree to.
Okay.
Because we need to know that for comparing and contrasting others. And I'm going to try to, between tonight and tomorrow, after tonight's show, if I'm up for it, I'm going to try to hurry and get the revised version that's ready for tomorrow. For us to do the BECME D&D evaluation with the updated form.
And then we should probably circle back.
Go back and do the drum circle version. Yeah, but we can do that later. Because that was just to help us refine this. And we will refine it again. And then we will go back through everything. Whatever we finally say we have a form we're happy with is going to keep revising as we do different versions. And we go, oh, we need to add this, we need to add this. Then we have to go back through every single one of them again with whatever is the stabilized form.
Right.
This is an early draft RFC.
Okay.
So, because I've got a lot of revisions in there already and more to make now. All right. So we will be back at 6 p.m. tonight. We will be doing some sort of game evaluation. We have a bunch to go through. This month it's mostly GURPS. Yeah, so it might be... I'm thinking COPS probably.
Is COPS going to have a
I think it's going to be the least... No, I don't think so. I don't really know.
That's the least amount of stretch you have to
do. And I don't know steampunk that well. So, John, are you interested in doing steampunk?
Sure, I'll do steampunk.
So, if I loan you these, let me get my name on them, and then...
Isn't it on it?
No, I just got these. So I've got mystery and cops. These are meant to go together. Mystery will go apply to any setting.
Right.
You can apply this mystery ideas to all genres. But
Literally.
yeah, it is designed specifically for that. It's got paranormal mysteries, science fiction mysteries, Old West one. It's got a whole variety. So this is meant to be an adjunct to others. So this and cops, because I'm really curious about us getting a cops one. Because that's our modern day, and cops
That's our
versus
police
mystery.
procedural. And the mysteries are going to help with the police procedural.
Right, exactly. But so there's that. What other?
There's no behavioral modification in GURPS.
Well, no, we didn't find good behavior modification in the GURPS supers.
Right.
That was specific to supers. There were no consequences for being a bad guy.
But what I'm saying is there is no behavioral modification in the core rules of GURPS.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
We were looking at just the supplements, not the core
we
rules.
should sign off real quick.
Yeah, so maybe, maybe what we need to do this session is, you're right, just do a basic default GURPS fantasy or sci-fi.
Okay.
Just so we get the base system down. GURPS Lite. GURPS Lite first, which won't have modification, but we got to get that.
Right.
So maybe before, and that gives us time to prepare on these. So we'll do a GURPS Lite, just whatever the introductory adventure, whatever I can just grab. Because part of what we're going to evaluate is how quickly and easily can we learn the system.
Can we have a folder?
Yeah.
Sure.
We should keep all the evaluation
I
forms
agree with
together.
you. I agree. Well, I need mine because I got to enter it into my thing.
It can still be with you. We're leaving the folder here.
Boy, I know I have folders everywhere, but everything's a mess right now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll sign up. So we'll be back at 6 p.m. tonight. It'll be GURP something.
Good night and dream well.
Something.
And that's Pacific time, by the way.
Washington time.
Where'd my mouse go? Mousy! Come back. Oh, I turned it off. That's why. Well, to save the battery, I'm in the habit of doing that.